When you're standing in front of the barbecue sauce shelf at the grocery store, you're not just picking a condiment. You're making a decision based on packaging design, brand familiarity, and promises printed on labels that don't always tell you what's really inside. Every summer, millions of shoppers reach for the same bottles they've bought for years, trusting that bigger brands mean better quality, cleaner ingredients, and real flavor. But the barbecue sauce aisle is one of the most deceptive sections in grocery retail, and once you understand how the category actually works, you'll see why some of the most trusted names are fundamentally compromised, and why better alternatives exist if you know what to look for. The issue isn't just that some sauces are worse than others. The issue is that the entire category is built on a contradiction that starts at the manufacturing level. Barbecue sauce is supposed to be about quality meat, patience, smoke, and flavor development over time. It's supposed to represent regional traditions, family recipes, and the careful balance of sweet, savory, acidic, and smoky notes that develop through real cooking experience. Yet the mass-market bottles sitting on the shelf in every supermarket across the country are engineered to prioritize shelf stability, visual consistency, and manufacturing efficiency over actual flavor complexity or ingredient integrity. These are two completely different priorities, and they lead to completely different products. When a brand chooses manufacturing convenience over flavor authenticity, the results show up immediately in the ingredient list, in the sourcing decisions, and ultimately in what you're actually serving at your summer table. The deception starts with how the category sells confidence. The packaging is designed to make you feel like you're buying expertise. The labels use words like artisan, authentic, traditional, or original. The bottles often feature images of smoked meat, fire, wood, or historical figures meant to evoke barbecue heritage. But look past that marketing layer, and you're looking at something completely different. You're looking at a formula engineered by food scientists who have never smoked meat, who have never tasted real barbecue, and who are solving a completely different problem than flavor development. They're solving the problem of how to make a sauce that tastes roughly the same in every bottle, that lasts on a shelf for months without separation or degradation, that appeals to the widest possible audience, and that costs as little as possible to manufacture. Those constraints produce a specific type of product, and that product is what you're actually buying. Let's start with the first major problem, the brands that have become synonymous with backyard barbecuing, the ones people buy reflexively without reading what's actually in the bottle. These are the brands that own shelf space and consumer habit. Heinz barbecue sauce has been a staple in American kitchens for generations. Walk into almost any supermarket and you'll find it in multiple varieties. The bottle is iconic, the branding is confident, the label is instantly recognizable. Walking past it in the aisle, you feel the weight of familiarity and trust. Heinz has spent decades making you feel like that bottle is the default option, the standard against which all other barbecue sauces should be measured. But look at the actual ingredient list, and immediately you're looking at high-fructose corn syrup as the second ingredient after tomato concentrate. High-fructose corn syrup is chosen in manufacturing because it's cheap, because it blends smoothly into the sauce texture without grittiness, and because it creates a consistent sweetness that doesn't vary batch to batch. The problem is that high-fructose corn syrup has a fundamentally different flavor profile than sugar. It doesn't taste like sugar. It tastes sweeter, flatter, and more one-dimensional. It's there, not because barbecue sauce needs that ingredient to taste good, but because it's economical for Heinz and it solves a manufacturing problem. The sauce also contains caramel color, which is essentially just burned sugar used to create visual consistency from batch to batch. It also contains soy sauce, which adds umami depth but also signals that the brand is compensating for missing depth elsewhere. You're paying for a name on the label while getting commodity ingredients that prioritize profit over flavor. Real barbecue sauce doesn't need to hide behind corn syrup. That's the fundamental trade-off you make the moment you grab that bottle. KC Masterpiece is another household name, and it presents an interesting case because it's positioned as a premium option, a step up from basic Heinz. The bottle design is darker and more sophisticated. The label uses language that suggests expertise and tradition. The branding suggests that you're buying something that's been perfected over time. But the ingredient list reveals the same compromise, just executed with a slightly different approach. You get high-fructose corn syrup again, along with a cocktail of emulsifiers, stabilizers, and preservatives that extend shelf life but dilute flavor. The soy sauce is there, the caramel color is there. What's missing is any ingredient that suggests actual barbecue expertise or flavor development. There's no complexity in the ingredient list. There's no indication that anyone tasted this and thought carefully about how it would interact with smoked meat. It's a formula engineered to appeal to the widest possible audience, which means it has to offend no one and excite no one. The premium positioning is marketing theater. The higher price point is justified by better packaging and more advertising, not by better ingredients. You're paying more for a different label, not a different product. Bullseye represents another variation on the same theme, but it's interesting because it actually reveals something about how the category thinks about ingredients. Bullseye contains both high-fructose corn syrup and molasses. Molasses is genuinely a better ingredient for barbecue sauce. It has real depth. It has history. It's what actual barbecue sauce makers have used for generations in real barbecue regions like Texas, the Carolinas, and Kansas City. Molasses brings complexity and a subtle bitterness that balances sweetness naturally. But Bullseye adds molasses to the ingredient list while simultaneously making high-fructose corn syrup the dominant sweetener. What's happening is that molasses is there mainly for visual appearance and label positioning. The molasses makes the sauce look darker and richer. The molasses gives the brand credibility to say, we use molasses on the label, but the high-fructose corn syrup is doing the actual sweetening work. You're getting the visual and textural benefits of molasses without the flavor benefits because the high-fructose corn syrup is overwhelming any subtle complexity molasses might have contributed. It's a half measure. It's ingredients theater. You think you're buying something with real molasses depth, and you are, technically. But you're also buying most of the same commodity formula as the cheaper brands, just with a more sophisticated label. Kraft barbecue sauce takes a different angle entirely. Kraft owns the mayonnaise category, the ketchup category, and the salad dressing category. They have incredible expertise in making shelf-stable sauces. They understand emulsification, they understand how to create visual consistency, they understand how to engineer a product that survives the supply chain. But barbecue sauce requires a different skill set than mayonnaise or ketchup. It requires understanding wood smoke, meat chemistry, regional flavor profiles, acid balance, and how sweetness interacts with smokiness. Kraft brings neither the expertise nor the will to go that deep. Their barbecue sauce is competent. It's fine. It's perfectly acceptable as a utility condiment that adds sweetness to meat without ruining it. But it has no identity, no confidence, no reason to exist except that Kraft has distribution infrastructure. You grab it because it's there and you recognize the label. That's the entire value proposition. The price is reasonable because the quality matches the price, but you're paying for distribution and marketing, not for flavor. Now let's talk about the brands that have figured out how to use premium positioning against consumer understanding. Sweet Baby Ray's positions itself as a mid-market option that's slightly better than the mainstream names. The packaging suggests an artisanal approach, a small batch feel, something made with care. The label uses warm colors and friendly typography. The branding suggests that you're buying something different from the big corporate sauces. But here's what's actually happening. Sweet Baby Ray's is adding artificial flavors on top of the commodity corn syrup base. So instead of getting sweetness and some depth from real ingredients, you're getting sweetness and artificial flavor notes designed to mimic complexity without actually delivering it. Artificial smoke flavor. Artificial barbecue smoke essence. These are chemical compounds engineered in a lab to taste like smoke without the actual smoking process. If you've ever tasted a bottle of Sweet Baby Ray's and felt like it was trying too hard, like the flavor was performing rather than genuine, like there was something slightly chemical about it, that's why. You're literally tasting artificial ingredients. You're paying for the feeling of artisanal branding around a mass-produced formula with chemical flavoring compounds. Then there's Stubbs, which is a particularly interesting and instructive case because Stubbs has built an entire brand story around authenticity and heritage. The founder, C.B. Stubblefield, supposedly created the sauce from a family recipe in Texas. The label emphasizes this heritage extensively. The branding suggests that you're buying something made with care and tradition, something passed down through generations. The bottle design looks rustic and authentic. The label copy tells a story. But Stubbs is now owned by McCormick, a massive food corporation with operations across multiple countries. The sauce is manufactured at scale. The sauce still contains high-fructose corn syrup. It still contains caramel color. It still contains soy sauce and stabilizers. The heritage story is real historically. C.B. Stubblefield did create the sauce decades ago, but the product has been reformulated to fit corporate manufacturing standards. The original recipe has been compromised in service of scaling production. You're paying a premium price because you believe the story on the label. The story is true historically. But the product you're buying today is not what the label implies it is. You're buying a heritage brand that's been hollowed out and refilled with a corporate formula. Finally, there's Cattleman's, which deserves careful attention because it represents a particular kind of deception that's become increasingly common in food retail. Cattleman's uses a slightly different sweetener formula than the other mainstream brands. Instead of high-fructose corn syrup as the primary sweetener, it uses regular sugar. That's genuinely better. Sugar has a cleaner flavor profile than high-fructose corn syrup. There's no question that sugar is the superior ingredient. But Cattleman's then immediately fills the rest of the ingredient list with caramel coloring, soy sauce, modified cornstarch, and preservatives. So you get one better ingredient and then a parade of compromises everywhere else. It's like buying a car that has one premium component surrounded by substandard parts. It's a partial win marketed as a full solution. The brand uses that one better ingredient as the basis for suggesting that the entire product is better, when the reality is that you've traded one problem for a different set of problems. These 7 brands represent something larger than just individual products. They represent the standard formula that dominates the mass-market barbecue sauce category. The formula works like this. Choose a cheap sweetening base, whether that's high-fructose corn syrup or sugar. Stabilize it with emulsifiers and preservatives so it doesn't separate on the shelf. Add soy sauce for umami depth you're not getting from real flavor development. Throw in caramel coloring for visual consistency, add artificial flavors if needed to create the impression of complexity, and then market it with heritage branding, premium positioning, or friendly artisanal aesthetics. That formula works economically. It works for distribution. It works for profit margins. It doesn't work for actual flavor or ingredient integrity. The reason this formula has become standard is economics. Manufacturing at scale requires stability. Distribution across the country requires shelf life. Profit margins require cheap ingredients. Marketing requires creating differentiation where none actually exists. These constraints push every brand toward the same compromise. Now, what actually works? What should you be reaching for instead? What's available in the grocery store that actually prioritizes flavor and ingredient integrity? The first genuinely better option is exploring Stubb's alternatives within their own product line, but specifically their spice rub and liquid smoke products rather than the standard red sauce. These products deliver real flavor complexity. The ingredient list is dramatically shorter. You see actual spices by name. You see liquid smoke, which is a real product derived from actual wood smoke, not an artificial flavoring compound. The sweetness, when present, comes from less reliance on sweeteners and more reliance on actual flavor depth. It costs more per unit than the standard sauce. It should cost more. You're getting different ingredients made with different priorities and different manufacturing constraints. A better alternative overall, if you can find it, and if you're willing to invest 20 minutes, is making your own barbecue sauce base using tomato sauce, vinegar, and brown sugar. Real brown sugar, not high-fructose corn syrup. You control the sweetness level. You control the acidity and tang. You control the spice profile. You can add actual spices like cumin, paprika, garlic powder, and black pepper. It takes 20 minutes. The cost per batch is lower than buying 2 bottles of mass-market sauce, and the flavor difference is extraordinary. This is the option that costs least and tastes best, which is unusual in retail, but that's because homemade actually prioritizes flavor where mass market prioritizes shelf stability and profit. If you want a store-bought option that's genuinely better and that doesn't require you to cook, Wickles barbecue sauce is worth seeking out. The ingredient list is shorter and cleaner. The sweetness is more restrained. The spice profile is more sophisticated. It actually tastes like someone cared about flavor balance rather than just hitting a sweetness target. It costs more per bottle, but you also use less of it because the flavor is more concentrated and more interesting. A bottle lasts longer because you're using smaller quantities. The flavor actually complements meat rather than drowning it in sweetness. There's also a category of regional sauces that are increasingly available in mainstream grocery stores or can be found through online retail. Soy vey, for example, is made in smaller batches with real citrus and spices instead of artificial flavors. The ingredient list reflects actual ingredients rather than a formula designed by food scientists. Rufus Teague is another option that delivers real complexity from spices and smoke rather than from corn syrup and caramel color. These aren't available in every supermarket yet, but they're becoming more accessible through larger retailers and through online platforms, and they represent what actually happens when a brand prioritizes flavor over manufacturing economy. There's also a growing category of craft barbecue sauce makers that are becoming more widely distributed. These are brands started by people who actually understand barbecue, who have tasted real regional barbecue, who understand smoke and meat chemistry. These brands cost more because they use better ingredients. They use less preservatives because smaller batch sizes mean shorter shelf times. They use real spices instead of artificial flavoring compounds. The ingredient lists are shorter. The flavor profiles are more interesting. These brands are increasingly available at mainstream grocery stores, particularly in the natural or organic sections, or through online delivery services. The real pattern here is this. The barbecue sauce category is split into 2 completely different manufacturing philosophies. One philosophy says, how do we make this as cheaply as possible while still tasting acceptable to the broadest audience? The other says, how do we make something that actually tastes good and respects the ingredient quality? Most of the brands sitting on that front shelf follow the first philosophy. The better options either follow the second philosophy or, in the case of homemade sauce, remove manufacturing economics from the equation entirely. Here's what you should actually do the next time you're standing in front of the barbecue sauce section. First, don't trust the front label. Don't trust the heritage story. Don't trust the premium positioning. Flip the bottle over and look at the back. Look at the second ingredient. If it's high-fructose corn syrup or regular sugar as the primary sweetener, that brand has decided that sweetness matters more than flavor complexity. That's a clear signal about the brand's priorities. Second, count the ingredients. If you see more than 15 ingredients, you're looking at a sauce engineered for shelf stability and manufacturing convenience, not for flavor. Third, look for artificial flavor or smoke flavor on the label. That's a signal that the brand is using chemical compounds to create taste rather than using actual ingredients to develop it naturally. Fourth, if the label emphasizes heritage or tradition or family recipe, check the actual ownership of the brand. If it's owned by a massive food corporation, the sauce has almost certainly been reformulated to fit their manufacturing standards and profit requirements, even if the heritage story is real and true. When you find a sauce that passes those checks, short ingredient list, no high-fructose corn syrup as a primary sweetener, no artificial flavors, no excessive stabilizers and preservatives, you found something worth buying. It will cost more. That's not a bug, that's a feature. It will last longer because you'll use less of it due to superior flavor concentration. And it will actually improve your barbecue instead of just making it sweeter or covering up other flavors. The larger truth about barbecue sauce, and this applies to a lot of condiments and processed foods more broadly, is that the grocery aisle has trained you to trust brand names that have been selling you compromises for so long that compromise feels normal. Heinz has spent decades making you feel like that bottle is the standard. Casey Masterpiece has spent decades creating a premium image around a commodity product. Sweet Baby Ray's has spent years building an artisanal aesthetic around mass-produced sauce with artificial flavoring. When you break the habit and try something actually better, the difference is shocking. Not shocking because it's drastically better or because the mainstream options are terrible. Just shocking because you realize you've been making a choice you didn't understand you were making. You thought you were buying barbecue sauce, you were actually buying sweetness with a brand name attached. So this summer, when you're grilling, reach for something different. Read that ingredient list carefully. Find a sauce where the ingredients actually serve flavor rather than manufacturing economy. Your barbecue will taste better. The meat will taste more like meat. The smoke will taste more like smoke. You'll spend less over time because you'll use less. And you'll know exactly what you're putting on your food. That's not premium pricing. That's actually paying for what you thought you were paying for all along. This is what real barbecue sauce tastes like. Now that you know the difference, you can't unknow it.